Hi, my name is Tom Estabrook. I'm a member here at First Parish, and I'm part of the organizing committee that's organizing the series on pandemic and possibility starting in the spring and going through the summer. So why are we here? Many of you joined us for Pandemic and Possibility, the panel in April, which had a great turnout of over 60 people at that event. This evening's presentation by Betsy Leondar-Wright is part 2 in our series. Betsy's presentation is about what we can do as a largely white community to support and be in solidarity with the movement for Black lives. Part 3 is the Sunday service on September 6th on pandemic, policing, and possibility. Before I introduce Betsy, I'd like to frame this evening's presentation with a comment on systems. Part 1 of our series in April identified institutional racism and the capitalist system, particularly the past 40 years of deregulated neoliberal capitalism, which are at the root of the harsh impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic in the United States among frontline workers of color and communities of color. In a similar way, the current rebellion by the movement for Black lives and those protesting in solidarity has exposed the interlocking systems of white supremacy and capitalist exploitation in the United States. Numerous scholars in the Black radical tradition, from W.E.B. Du Bois to Keeanga-Yamahtta Taylor, Cornel West, and Ibram Kendi, have regarded this twinned system as racial capitalism. Racism and capitalism since the colonial period have been locked together tightly. The centuries-long struggle against slavery and white supremacy in our institutions is bound up with the centuries-long struggle against exploitation of working people, dehumanization of vulnerable populations, and the vast destruction of nature by an economic system that places private profit of the few over the basic human needs of the many and over ecological sustainability. These struggles, including the current movement for Black lives, are intimately tied together. With that, I want to welcome Betsy Leondar-Wright, a First Parish member for the past 8 years and a practitioner and scholar of social movement activism. Betsy will be followed by Ikram Muhammad, who will speak about her activism. Welcome, Betsy.
I'm not muted. Hello, everybody. I'm so tickled to see you all here this evening. So the purpose of this workshop is to answer some questions that a lot of us are finding ourselves asking these days in this amazing, inspiring activist moment. How can I help? How can we help the movement to have the maximum impact and reduce as much racism as possible? I think that's the moment that we're in. Oh geez, okay. I might need some technical help here because, hey, there we are. Okay, because I don't know how to move a slide forward. Okay, no, I'm good. So this has surprised a lot of people. Like, why this?
You're muted.
I'm muted?
Oh, you're good. You're
okay.
good.
I'm good?
Okay.
You're good.
Okay. So, so in order to help the movement succeed as much as possible, a lot of us are asking, like, why now? It's not like the other police murders of Black people were less egregious or tragic than George Floyd's murder. So why did this one lead to so much more activism and now so much more change happening than the others? And there's many reasons. This is a really unusual historical moment with the COVID shutdown, and then related to that, the eroding of support of President Trump. So we definitely have a political opportunity at this moment, but I don't think those are the biggest reasons. I think the biggest reason is because the groundwork had been laid by earlier activism and the public education that's been going on, especially since 2014. There we go. So to understand why now and what what laid the groundwork for this amazing time, I need to go over the theory that social movements have stages. So most of the progressive change that we've seen in our country and around the world in the last century or more has come through grassroots people's movements for change. And there's a lot of analysts who say there are stages to social movements. And this is one I particularly like, the Movement Action Plan, because it's very empirically based. It's based on a composite of dozens of different social movements in the 20th century, especially. So I'm going to quickly go through this complicated chart just so that I can make some points about where we are right now. So you see the left axis, 10% to 90%. That's the percent of the public that first has awareness of the problem, later opposes the injustices, the power holders' policies, and supports the movement alternatives. So these three lines that you see going through the stages are how that public awareness, public opposition, public support rise over time in a successful movement. So just to name them quickly, in stage one, business as usual, the injustice does exist, but many people are not aware of it. There's not organized, there might be individual resistance, but there's not organized resistance. And often when people decide to push back on the injustice or the social problem, the first thing they do is go through official channels and do a court case or try to get legislation passed. And the movement as a movement starts when that fails. Lots of social problems get, taken care of through some official channel. Social movement is when that doesn't work. So because people are like, okay, we're going to have to go outside the system. So the most famous example of stage two is the Supreme Court decision, Brown versus Board of Education. The people trying to end segregation in the Southern schools first did this case. It went all the way to the Supreme Court. They said segregated schools are illegal, and yet segregated schools continued. So that's when people really started organizing en masse. That's when all the civil rights groups started organizing and going more public and taking more action. Is stage three. So stage three is super important. It often goes on for years, needs to be really, really well done in order to take advantage of a trigger event, meaning something that throws the issue into public consciousness. And then the stage four is takeoff. That's when you suddenly see lots of people in the streets and everybody's suddenly aware there's a such and such movement. A lot of people think that the trigger event causes the takeoff, but it's actually not true. There are many terrible events and many terrible injustices that do not lead to the takeoff of a mass movement. I know this really well from the first movement I was ever involved in was the anti-nuclear power movement. And people would regularly say, when there was the 3 years of no nukes rallies, really huge movement in the late 70s, 1980, they were like, oh, the 3 Mile Island nuclear accident caused that movement. No, it didn't. It really didn't, because there were other accidents just as bad back at stages 1 and 2, and nobody protested. Excuse me, nobody got involved, or very tiny numbers. So it's because 3 Mile Island was a trigger event for a mass movement takeoff because of the good work that had been done, raising public awareness, doing creative direct action, organizing, educating during stage 3. So that's very important to understand for the stage we're at now. So, okay, so takeoff is very exciting. Lots of us adore the takeoff stage of a cause that we love. We're all in the streets. Zillions of people are getting involved who were never involved before. And that always shrinks again. There's never been a movement where stage 4 lasts all that long. At best, it's a couple years, and sometimes it's just months. So that's why stage 5 is the perception of failure. And activists, even core organizers, drop out en masse in discouragement, thinking nobody's coming out to demonstrations anymore. The protests have stopped. People don't care anymore. We give up, we go home. And that is a naive perception, because the street protests and the mass movement are not, the mass mobilization are not the whole movement. The work is just getting going to win the majority of the public over to opposing the injustice, to supporting the alternatives. And so it's the stage 6 is super, super important. And then if you do a really good job, when there are re-trigger events and other moments of mobilization, if you do a really good job in stage 6, you enter stage 7. Stage 7 does not mean the issue, the success does not mean the issue is gone. The injustice is not over. There's never been a movement that's won 100% of the better society that it's aimed for. But enough of the concrete goals of the movement are won that a lot of activists move on to another issue, reframe it. So with nuclear power, people started to oppose nuclear plants, support the alternative renewable energy. We went from, there were 2,000, as of 1980, there were 2,000 nuclear reactors planned for the US, and basically none of them were built. We had the same 95 now as we had, as were in the works then. So most people went on to work on nuclear weapons or other environmental issues. So how does this relate to where we are now? I think I am overjoyed to say that the Black Lives Matter movement is entering the success phase, stage 7. Reaching stage 7 for a big national movement is pretty rare to really get that far. So I feel like we should just take a moment and celebrate what has changed in these last couple months of, flags and statues coming down and team names being changed and police reforms getting passed in so many different parts of the country, that this is amazing how fast things are happening. I believe, maybe I'm being an optimist, I believe this is the most substantial dismantling of white supremacy and institutionalized racism that we have seen in over half a century. I'm really thrilled. If you think what movements of our adult lives have reached stage 7 on a national level, on a big level, LGBTQ for sure, but not too many. So this is incredible, and to know how to maximize that success, to know how to get it to really take off, we need to say, why is it happening? Why is it happening? And my opinion is that the Black Lives Matter movement really aced stage 3 and the first round of stage 4 in 2014, 15, 16. Quick action, the biggest trigger event until now was Michael Brown's killing. So first of all, the already existing slogan, Black Lives Matter, best messaging ever, really great slogan, and very quick organizing and powerful organizing in Ferguson, Missouri. There was tons of training of activists, tons of organizations springing up. Nationally, the movement for Black Lives has been very coordinated, put forward this powerful platform of an inspiring vision of our society. So very coordinated. There's 150 members of the coalition right now. But also it was decentralized. The 3 founders, Black Lives Matter, said, y'all form chapters. We're not telling you what to do. You set your goals. And so a whole proliferation of varied campaigns for many sub-goals happened under the name Black Lives Matter. So I underlined that word, or I bolded that word. You can see there, campaigns. I want to now define, this is my key concept that I want to give you in this webinar, is the concept of campaigns. That social movements are not just a cause that gets spread to the mass population. The big goals are not the only thing you focus on. Successful movements win by waging many, many, many campaigns, many of them local, not all. So a campaign means you setting a smaller than the whole movement's goal, a smaller winnable goal. And here I have a picture of one of the most famous campaigns in American history, the desegregating one lunch counter at a time, spread like wildfire, replicable tactics, spread like wildfire all over the South. And a campaign is defined as a groups putting pressure on a specific power holder who can say yes to the demand, to the small goal. So this is targeting. I want to emphasize that word targeting. You don't just oppose the broad thing like white supremacy. You find someone to target, a person or an entity or and you target them with collective action, people working together. Campaigns cannot be done by one person. So you come up with tactics that withdraw money from the target, like boycotts and strikes, things that disrupt their routines, make it impossible for them to continue business as usual, like civil disobedience, disruptions, and grassroots lobbying, getting everybody to put pressure on elected officials and other decision makers. A campaign can definitely be waged through social media, but by my definition, just social media does not constitute a campaign because it's a very rare target authority figure that can feel pressured just by what's happening on social media. So campaigns vary a lot, and they vary by playing 4 different roles. A successful movement, all 4 of these roles get played. So you have to have some rebels. If there's no rebel energy, there's no movement. So there have to be people willing to take those risks, disrupt things, increase the cost of the status quo to the power holders. There also have to be reformers. There have to be people pushing, working through official channels like legislation, courts, negotiations, and implementing those small successes. So those are the 2 roles that directly put pressure on the target power holders, and they often are at odds with each other. They tend to be different subcultures, and there's often criticism of each other's tactics and sometimes rancorous splits that break the movement apart. Movements are stronger when the rebels and the reformers respect each other and even collaborate. So besides that direct pressure, you also need people being the messengers to the mainstream, the people who make the cause catchy, create those memes and things, and persuade the people who disagree, persuade the inactive public. We'll be coming back to that special role. And then organizers. When people turn out and just do one thing, like protest on a street corner, they need to be drawn in to organizations, drawn in to play ongoing roles, and organizations need to be built up with, fundraising and organizational development. And then, of course, not everybody plays one of those big roles. All 4 roles need helpers. And so one thing to ask yourself is, which of these seems like it fits you? That, what different campaigns you might consider getting involved in. You might say, well, what role are they playing? And what role am I drawn to? So, So this is basically my takeaway I want you to take from this webinar. If you want to make it as big as possible a difference against racism right now, don't only read and watch and listen to all these amazing resources about racism, how to be more anti-racist. That's great to do. Don't only do that. Don't only hold up Black Lives Matter signs at random times and places, which, boy, it seems like so many First Parish members have been doing, including me. It's a great thing to do. Don't only do that, but also join a campaign. If you have time, become an active member of a campaign, put your time into it. If you can't, you can support a campaign. And especially if you're a white person like I am, you look for campaigns where activists of color are taking leadership and saying, this campaign is what we need, and join that campaign. So we have a ton of choices right now. We are extremely rich in active campaigns. The 8 Can't Wait hit the ground running. There's so many places around the country that are getting those particular local police reforms, but also the bigger things, defunding, refunding. Just everywhere you look, people are pressing to get flags and statues and team names changed. There's a campaign to get the hate off Facebook right now. People are pressuring particular corporations to diversify their hiring and their promotions. And I'm not going to describe any of these, but we are super lucky to have with us someone at the forefront of a hot current campaign. So Ikra Muhammad, welcome, and so glad you can be with us.
Thank you so much, Betsy and Anne, for inviting me. I'm in the basement of a store right now, and there's doing a lot of work upstairs, so bear with me if you hear a few noises. I'm going to introduce myself a little bit. So my name is Ikram Mahmoud, pronounced Ikram, and I'm 18 years old. I just graduated high school, and I'm going to go to college in the fall. And so I was working under the Defund Boss Cops, or Defunding Local Police campaign. You can see that on the second bullet point in the slideshow. And I'm going to be covering a couple points. So how did the group that I'm working, how did we get together? Basically, after the big May 31st protest in Boston, there was a really big protest. I was introduced to a coalition of various Boston organizations across the city. And it's just a few groups of people. This coalition, it's wide, and the people I were introduced to were just a few people from it. And we got together to make our own actions. And how did we choose our campaign and our tactics? Basically, what we did was we brainstormed over Zoom, a couple Zoom meetings, maybe 1 or 2, and we decided our demands. We decided what specific actions we were going to take and what words we were going to use, like what the message was. So our demands were defund and reinvest. So defund, obviously, the police, and reinvest into youth jobs and local communities. And the direct actions, the specific actions that I was a part of organizing was we held a rally on about a month ago on Tuesday. I forget which day it was, but it was in June. And we held a rally. We held a rally right in front of City Hall. And that was the direct action we were taking. We didn't just hold that rally, we also blocked an intersection. So those 2 actions were intertwined. They were initially meant to be 2 different actions on 2 different days, but we decided to put them together so everybody can, so there could be more manpower, more support. So yeah, those were the actions that we took. And how did we choose our targets? So basically, we wanted to grab the attention of our government officials. So for the city of Boston, that's Mayor Marty Walsh and the city councilors, the 13 city councilors. So there was also another direct action that I was a part of coming up with the idea of. However, I wasn't organizing that. We passed that off to another organization, or like coalition, and that coalition is called FTP, for the people. And that action was basically showing up to city councilors' houses in like the crack of dawn in the morning, and rallying, protesting, banners, a whole bunch of stuff. And it was really cool. I saw it online. I wasn't there, but I saw it online. It was really cool. And yeah, so we wanted to grab the attention of our government officials, the city councilors. That had to do with the city council's action, the one that was held in the morning. And our action, the rally and blocking the intersection, we wanted to grab the attention of the Mayor Marty Walsh. We knew that the city councilors probably spent a lot more time at home than he did. He spent a lot more time working in City Hall than the city councilors were, even during the coronavirus pandemic. So we held an intersection right in front of City Hall, just like a block down from it. And then we held a rally right in front of City Hall, like literally on the plaza. And the reason we wanted to grab the attention of those specific people was because our demands had to do with legislature. We wanted certain things written into our legislation. So that's why we chose those specific people. And our message, how did we frame our message? Aside from the main hashtag defund boss cops, you may or may not have seen that somewhere on social media. That's a really big hashtag. It's very vast. But our campaign was to be advertised on social media, our specific rally. So what we did was we highlighted 1 or 2 words, and those words were defund and reinvest. Specifically, they were on the flyer, they were everywhere. And we decided that those 2 words captured the essence of our message. They captured the essence of what we wanted to happen, our demands, everything. So what we wanted was to defund the local Boston police and reinvest into youth jobs in our local communities. Yeah, everything else was pretty obvious. Once you heard those 2 words, you know what we were with, you know what we were about. And what part does capacity building, recruiting and or training new members or activists play in our campaign? So with current or past actions, it was pretty much the same. We first brainstormed what we were going to do and what our demands were, and then we recruited. So if we didn't have enough people to carry out what we needed to carry out, we recruited. Each one of us, we talked to our friends, our peers, and yeah, we basically came up with a bunch of volunteers, a bunch of helpful people, manpower, that way. And for training, so our rally, we didn't just hold a rally, we blocked a whole intersection. And to do that, we had to prepare for all scenarios, best and worst case scenarios. So what we did was, we literally, by chaining ourselves together, I wasn't one of the people who chained themselves together, but I was one of the organizers. And by chaining ourselves together, we took up certain lanes in the intersection that we were blocking. So there were about 4 or 5 groups of people, like 3 to 4 people each group. So we called them pods, and each pod had about 3 to 4 people. And we took about like 1 or 2 lanes per street. So that's how we blocked the intersection. And we had a training day. We spent 1 weekend training everybody who's going to be like an active member of the blocking the intersection. We trained them in the law, like what would happen if you got arrested, what would happen if your case was brought to a judge, what to do if cops show up, who's going to talk to them, who's going to stay silent, how to support the people who are in pods, like, you know, sitting on cement in a really, really hot sun. It's gonna get, you know, you're gonna have to have a few steps. Yeah. And yeah, so we made sure to have enough volunteers, because not only just with the actual active part of it, but the organizing too, because the workload was tough. So we made sure to have enough people to maintain the workload for everybody, and we made sure to compensate people who needed compensation. And the future of my group's work, we are currently in the works, prepping for future actions, and they're similar to the action that I'm talking about right now. We want to do multiple, you know, in-person events, and we also want to do, like, we want to create a curriculum, a toolkit for anybody who wants to be introduced to something like this. So that curriculum would basically cover who we are, so basically who's in charge, what position you can play in something like this, what our message was, what our demands are, what we want from the Boston City Council and the mayor. It would also cover how to support and how to help. It would cover every issue that we come up with and the solutions we draft for those issues. So that's the curriculum that we want to create. That kind of curriculum would be continuous. It wouldn't be like one event, one day event. It would be something that you can find online. It could probably be a website, maybe a document, a PDF that anybody can access. So yeah, that's pretty much it. And we're doing a lot of work right now. And hopefully maybe some of you guys can join in the future.
All right, let's do
are various ways of doing applause with the little reaction button or wave your hands in the air, which we do a lot at First Parish. Little like, thank you, Ikram. Boy, doesn't that just sound like the greatest campaign out there. Any questions, reactions? I'm gonna start screen sharing again.
Oh, hold on a second. We have a couple of questions here for Ikram. One, where did you get funding? It's a good question. So Ikram, I'll ask you to unmute. There you go.
Oh, okay, my bad. I accidentally muted myself. The question, where did we get funding? So I was actually in charge of funding. There's a group called the Boston Mutual Aid Fund. I call it BMAF because there's multiple mutual aid funds. There's a Dorchester Mutual Aid Fund, so I called it BMAF. They are composed of basically three Muslim girls that I'm sort of like associates with. I just learned about them, and after our rally, I got to know one of them better. So what they do is they collect donations from the public, from the vast public. So they collect them through Venmo, Cash App, any app that you can send money through. And all the money that they collect goes towards organizers. So if you're an organizer for a protest, if you organize for an event where you want to crowdsource, you want to help people in shelters or whatever, it's mainly for protest though, because the current Black Lives Matter movement, the current, wave of protests is after, my fault. It's basically was created for this current wave of protests right now, especially during the coronavirus pandemic. So we needed a lot of funds for resources to use during the rally, like water, hand sanitizers, masks, and stuff like that. So I talked to them. They said, just give us an estimate of what you need, whether it be money or certain resources, and we'll get you both. And I talked to my people with that, and we decided how much we needed, and they sent me that much. That's all it was. That's how we got funding.
Okay, Betsy, do we have time for one more question, or should we move?
Sure, I'll say some things quickly to make, because I think this is wonderful to hear from Ikram.
Okay, the training, does this training, Ikram, does the training you were referring to emphasize nonviolence or no resistance directly and clearly? And does that play a role in the success?
Yeah, so the training that we had we actually did exactly that. We emphasized nonviolence. So none of the people in the pods were meant to aggravate anybody or escalate anything whatsoever if the cops had shown up. We were meant to, the people in the pods, during the trainings, we clarified what the difference between resistance and standing your ground is. So we wanted to stay our ground. We wanted to stand our ground, but we did not want to have any future problems from resisting the cops. So we made sure that the people who were in the pods just like interlock their arms if they were ever, they try to pick them up or like move them from the lanes. And that's pretty much what it was. We made sure that they knew what their situations were. We made sure to use people who were aware of the risk of arrest and were okay with that. So yeah, we emphasized nonviolence, no escalation whatsoever, and no resistance. But we wanted to make sure that we had staying power, had standing ground.
Great.
All right.
See?
Thank you so much, Ikram. Let me screen share again. So there's like a fantastic example of a campaign, and there's so many happening right now. It's just a cornucopia of opportunities. So if you have a little time, a little money, a little energy, a little network that you can publicize something to, how do you pick of all the current campaigns, which one you want to join or support? And a lot of campaigns fizzle and don't result in much. You try things and see if they work. But in some, you can kind of tell in advance. they're more likely to be effective than others to succeed, to win a small winnable goal and help the movement move farther through that, the stage 7 of, which is always partial success, but we want to maximize the success. So that's the goal of this workshop, is to give you tools to help you pick one campaign that suits you, that is most likely to win on some significant goal and is most likely to help build the overall movement. And I'm going to give you 3 criteria to evaluate them with. I just want to point out the picture that is First Parish, the church that many of us on this call share in the background. And this was that huge march in June in Arlington. And that's the first time I saw the slogan, 8 can't wait. Okay, so to explain the first criterion, I need to talk some theory about how do social movements wield power. Social movements are so powerful. They've literally like moved mountains. And how does that work? Because injustices often seem really overwhelming and really daunting. Like the power holders that we see committing so much injustice seem very powerful, but that is an illusion, because you can only wield authority with a lot of support. Politicians need to be elected, companies need customers and workers to cooperate with them. They're all dependent on other institutions and on other people. So the red triangle there is the big scary purveyor of the injustice. So you could call that Trump, or you could call that white supremacy or whatever. But you can see it's being held up by the blue triangles, which themselves are precariously balanced. They're only sticking up because they're getting support from the little green triangles and the little canes. And so this is how activists can have power, is by pulling away support. So the place where I saw this work most powerfully in my activist life was the anti-apartheid movement. I was involved in the 80s and into the 90s. This was so intimidating because the apartheid government, would do any amount of violence to prevent multiracial democracy in South Africa. They were vicious in their attempt to stay in power. And they, of course, for some of us, they were thousands of miles away. Why would they care that they were being opposed by these people in the US and Europe? It seemed like there was nothing we could do. It was very discouraging. Most of the activism at first was South African people. But, so the primary target, the apartheid government's the big red triangle, did not listen to us. However, there were targets we could influence. They were propped up by the US government, and other governments. They were propped up by multinational corporations doing business in South Africa, supplying them. And so those are secondary targets. And some of those activists around the world could put pressure on. There were ways we could get them to stop supporting the apartheid government. So that's what activism is. That's what a campaign does, is pull away support from the enactors of the injustice. So the trick is to say, okay, what secondary target would be amenable to a grassroots movement? I mean, would be vulnerable, that's a good word for it, to a grassroots movement. So of course, in South Africa, the South African people were an essential support. And so they pulled away their support through boycotts and strikes. They burned their identity passes. They took, of course, most of the risks. But around the world, the divestment campaign, where it's like, oh, if we pressure Coca-Cola, we're consumers of Coca-Cola products, if we pressure them, don't do business with the apartheid government in South Africa, or we will boycott you. Okay, that's good. Xerox. I don't know if some of you are probably old enough to remember all those things we boycotted because they did business with South Africa. Okay, so that was pulling away support in our role as consumers. But then think about our other spheres of influence. We are not just consumers, we are not just voters. So all over the world, people put pressure on their own workplaces, their colleges, their retirement funds, their religious congregations, saying, stop investing in companies that do business with South Africa. And when Nelson Mandela came through in his victory tour, when multiracial democracy was won, and he was the president, he said to the people of US and Europe, he said that was the crucial blow. That's what they caved. So that's the big thud. You see the triangle of the apartheid government coming down. They were the primary target who we couldn't touch, but within all our separate spheres of influence, we were able to pick out some well-chosen secondary targets. So to me, this is the most important criterion for, is a campaign going to really make some change? Is it well targeted? Has the campaign leaders picked out decision makers who could say yes to a winnable goal, secondary targets who could influence those decision makers? And yeah, I loved how you said that, Ikram, like, the change can be made by the mayor and the city council. So you targeted the mayor and the city council. That's like, that is perfect. So throughout Black Lives Matter, I think we're seeing excellent examples of targeting. We saw it back in the first wave of 2014 to 16 in Ferguson and all over, pressuring politicians and kicking them out of office if they wouldn't support the police reforms. But in Massachusetts, where we have a lot less police brutality than some other parts of the country, but Black Lives Matter chapters cleverly pick different targets. So Cambridge Black Lives Matter focused on affordable housing, the most important, the most vicious form of institutionalized racism in Massachusetts. A bunch of Cambridge Black Lives Matter activists chained themselves to the front door of Cambridge City Hall, and they won an affordable housing reform. And of course, another really well-targeted campaign on the state legislature. A lot of you on this call know about the criminal justice reform, the campaign to get that comprehensive reform bill passed. First Parish, the working group on mass incarceration, was a very active part of that. So those were really appropriate targeting given what the problems are in our state. So again, I think we're seeing some great targeting with Defund and Reinvest, with 8 Can't Wait. Every statue seems to have a campaign pressuring, very Confederate general statue has a campaign to get it down. The Color of Change campaign to get hate off Facebook. There's just a proliferation. So, so that's the first thing to screen for, is it well targeted? Is the target somebody who can really succumb to pressure and make a change that will actually reduce the amount of racism? So we also have seen some examples of not so good targeting. In my humble opinion, we may have lots of disagreement among us, and that's fine. I think that smashing buildings and cars in random other parts of the city, far away from where police brutality has happened, far away from a government center or a police headquarters, that's not just bad targeting, that's not targeting at all. That's like, yeah, that's anti-targeting. The other one, and I bet a lot of you will disagree with me on this, I think that when the protests moved in Arlington Center to the Whole Foods, I understand where the employees are coming from in saying they want to be able to wear Black Lives Matter masks. But given where we see institutionalized racism in Arlington and Massachusetts, I think that's kind of weak targeting, because if that demand were won, how much would the injustice really change? But you may disagree with me, but I would stick with the ones where, going back to where it seems like some pushing is really going to make change happen. All right. on to, I'm sure, feel free to put questions in the chat and disagreements. So we are now going to go into small groups, and just for like 10, 12 minutes, and there'll be groups of 4. And here's the suggested questions. You can talk about whatever you want, but I think it's a really good reflection question to say, well, what are my spheres of influence? Am I, a worker, a student, a consumer, a voter, a congregation member? Where do I come together with other people? And how could there be collective action in that realm? Let's everybody pool in your small groups. What campaigns have you heard about against institutionalized racism or another injustice you care about? And put this evaluatory assessment question on those campaigns. Do they seem to target an appropriate power holder, decision maker who can say yes to a winnable goal that will move the movement's goals forward? So so we're gonna put those questions will appear in the chat so that you can look at them while you're in your small groups. And I hope you have good conversations. Hello, welcome back. Can everybody see me and hear hear me and see my screen? Good. So I hope you had good discussions. So
I'm out of the group. You're all good.
Good. Okay. So remember, I'm going to do 3 criteria for analyzing the effectiveness, the likely effectiveness of a campaign. And the second one is about the messaging of the campaign. Is the messaging well framed? So a frame is like a window, like you see there. A frame, we are constantly looking through frames. Our brains can't process the gazillions of raw data input coming from our senses. So we're constantly framing reality as an interpretation of what's going on. When we talk about public issues, we hold a certain frame. We might hold parts of more than one. We often have contradictory frames in our head. And most of us do shift frames during our lives. So people do change frames. So a frame on a controversial public issue has slogans and key words. You can tell what the whole frame is. Like if someone says illegal alien and someone else says undocumented immigrant, you kind of know the rest of what stories they would tell, what symbolism they would use, what emotion they would invest in immigrant issues. With controversial public issues, there are often 2 frames where these stories, they each have their heroes, their villains, their key examples. The most famous, I think, in US history is pro-life, pro-choice. That's a frame contest where there's 2 of these worldviews conflicting with each other, trying to win over public opinion to their side. And the goal of any social movement, one of the goals is to shift people's frames. So we have been seeing in this last 5 years a big old frame contest: Black Lives Matter versus All Lives Matter. Black Lives Matter versus Blue Lives Matter. Many movements get this kind of backlash of an opposing frame. When you're thinking about what's the messaging of a campaign, you need to say, well, for what audience? Who are you trying to persuade of what? So here we see, all these drawings are drawn by my lovely niece Alea, that you can see a spectrum here from the active opponents of your cause on one side to the active supporters on the other side, and in between. So one trick is of many good framers and messengers is don't worry about the frame for your active opponents. It's not likely to work, so just ignore them. But come up with different messages for the middle 3. So you see those little arrows that go across between the wedges. So for your passive opponents who are supporting your active opponents, You want to cast doubts in their mind. You want to make them think, huh, maybe I'm not so right about that. Get them a little more confused or a little more woken up. And then similarly, for what's usually the vast majority of people is undecided, mixed opinion, neutral people, you want to have some messaging that appeals to them through shared values. So in, a lot of this is in the US is this movement is white people. So, okay, the white people that haven't decided to support Black Lives Matter yet, what values do they hold? Talking about American values, like freedom, like all people are created equal, talking to religious people in terms of their religious values. What you do have values in common with those folks. And so crafting a message that will bridge to where they are and get them to become passive supporters of our cause. And that's what we've just seen to a remarkable degree. Remember back in my stages of social movements chart, the rise in the percent of the general public that supports the cause, that opposes that's aware of it, that opposes the power holders' injustices, and that supports the movement's alternatives. Not just general public opinion, white people just shot up to 75% supporting it used to be a minority, 75% supporting the goals of the Black Lives Matter movement. So this has been done extremely well with the messaging that that appeals to them, and of course the fact that there was a continuous video of George Floyd's murder made a difference there, that even people who are pretty conflicted still know that was wrong. So I want to pause and say, defund the police as a message when people don't have a chance to hear the explanation of it and don't have a chance to hear the second part of the message that Ikram told us. Reinvest in communities, reinvest in human services. That one does not work. My perception is does not work with the passive opponents and the undecided and mixed neutral people. That's a handing a gift to the backlash All Lives Matter movement. So I think it's a really good one for getting the passive supporters. We talked about this in our small group, getting people who have been supportive but not active, like, whoa, we could get this to happen. Well, that does sound like a better vision of our cities. So you do a different set of messaging for the people who agree with you but are not activists. You want to get as many people active in campaigns as possible. So what kind of message works for the passive supporters, getting them to be active? There's a piece of theory by Bill Gampson that the frame that mobilizes activism is called a collective action frame, meaning it points to an injustice, it defines the social problem as an injustice, it points to an us versus them identity. So we the people of color, and we the white allies, we anti-racists. And most important, it has the element of hope, of agency, that we the people can overcome the injustice. If you can put that into your messaging, it's really likely to work. All right, so if you have questions, they can go into the chat, because I want to move on to the third criterion. The other thing to ask if you're looking at a certain campaign, look at the organization or organizations that are sponsoring it and say, what are they doing with their organization? What's the culture of the organization like? And how much do they draw new people in and build their leadership? So a healthy movement has a movement culture, and different organizations and campaigns build a sense of warm community. It's fun, it's a pleasure to be there. There's build up loyalty to each other and to leaders. And most importantly, as new people come in, they get chances to step into bigger roles, develop their skills, develop their leadership. they're inspired by the leaders and empowered to raise their own voices. So yeah, so you wanna throw yourself into a campaign where the organization is like that. And the great rule of thumb that I learned from my sister Ann Wright, one of the organizers of this webinar, is a good organization that's movement building puts half of its resources, its staff time, its money, et cetera, into waging its campaigns, but half into capacity building, leadership development, and building a stronger organization. And also building coalitions. So mass movements like the one we're in right now are made up of hundreds, in our case, I think you could say tens of thousands of small informal networks, groups, campaigns, organizations that are weak if scattered. So campaigns are the building block of a movement, but if they don't communicate with each other, don't work with each other, don't coordinate, then they're weaker. So you start to say, oh, this is the such and such movement when everyone is well coordinated, and especially to look for coordination between directly affected people harmed by the injustice and their allies, the more privileged people, between grassroots people without any particular power and the people in positions of power, rich people, celebrities, etc. Yeah, people in formal positions of power. And then, of course, remember, you need to coordinate between the rebels and reformers and avoid those kind of rancorous splits. So yeah, so I think that's the third criterion is the organization or organizations leading the campaign building capacity and community? So this is the three questions. I'm summing up now to end and go on to the discussion portion of if you want to pick something to get involved with or to support, ask yourself, what campaign are they waging? Is it well targeted in its goals, its tactics, who they're pressuring? Is it well-framed messaging that's appropriate to the audience? And are they building community and capacity through their grassroots organizing and their organizational development? Now, some of you may have campaigns already in your mind, but I know some people don't know about the campaigns happening right now. And so I'm going to give you some sources where there's three organizations I know about where they steer activists to varied campaigns. So first, the Color of Change. I always really admire their, Color of Change petitions. I always admire their targeting. So this graphic is 3 off their website right now. You can always just go to colorofchange.org and find who around the country needs supporters to do a certain thing. They always do petitions, but they also do other tactics as well. Second, Surge, showing up for racial justice. It's a national organization. It organizes white people to get actively involved in campaigns led by people of color against racism of many kinds, including affordable housing, which is our most entrenched form of institutionalized racism in Massachusetts, but for immigrants, police issues, workplace issues. We have a Boston chapter of Surge, and I get an email weekly with calls to action of, come to this event, come and block this deportation or eviction, sign this petition. And they have these action hours you can see there in the graphic where everybody gets together and does, contacts a legislator or something like that together at the same time. So I love Surge. And then also Violence in Boston. This is one of the 2 lead organizations that has organized and led most of the biggest Boston Black Lives Matter marches. And they have a long track record working against violence in Boston. And they have, when you go to their website, you can choose what social impact team you want to join. So that's just 3. I think somebody's going to put these 3 URLs in the chat. That's 3 organizations that if you want to be made aware of varied campaigns you could support, you can get them there. So I want to suggest that if you find a campaign that meets these 3 criteria, well-targeted, well-framed, really good at building capacity, building community, developing leadership. I hope you will join in, give your time, give your membership, take whatever actions they ask you to do, donate as much money as you can afford, reach out to in your spheres of influence and your networks and recruit other people and do whatever you can to spread the word about it. So I'm going to turn the mic over to Tom Estabrook, who is going to raise questions from the chat.
Great. Great. So couple of questions from the chat. Okay, one, maybe, okay, so this is from Lois. Do you see a special role for spiritual or ethical communities? What about the Poor People's Campaign?
Would anyone else on the organizing team like to take that one, or shall I say? Let me ask, did the Moral Mondays leader, Reverend Barber and the others, did anyone go to their what was it, end of June? It was going to be a mass Poor People's campaign, mass Poor People's March, but instead they did it online. It was amazing. And they had me in tears with all the clergy and people speaking from spiritual and religious traditions of all types. And also all the voices of people, you know, going without healthcare, going without housing, hungry, speaking from their own, you know, environmental racism, being poisoned, all these people speaking on their own experience. So I think religious-based organizing has been one of the most powerful forms of community organizing in the last 20 years in the US. I think they are exemplary in drawing people in on a moral basis.
I just add one more quick comment about religious organizations, religious communities, is that they have the great advantage of already being organized. And you don't have to go after individuals one by one. If you can work through a group that's already together and has a shared purpose and experience working together, you can leverage your effectiveness dramatically.
Do people know the two big networks of those, the interfaith organizations, PICO and the IAF, Industrial Areas Foundation? I believe those are the two biggest networks of community organizing in the country, and they're religiously based.
Another question has to do with Occupy Wall Street. This question came up once a little bit earlier. Why did it fall apart? Or what happened to it?
I am very opinionated on this topic. I went down to Occupy Boston and also Occupy New York, and I was studying social movement groups at the time. This is actually, that is some of how I got so obsessed with targeting. So I listened to these interminable meetings about how we can't pick any goals because all goals are welcome. And I write about this in my book, Missing Class, that the sort of ultra egalitarian, like let's listen to all voices, even if it takes all night, and it would be sort of oppressive to pick a goal. My favorite moment of Occupy Boston was when the kick-ass group City Life Vida Urbana and a coalition of other affordable housing groups working against, you know, foreclosures and evictions at the time, they organized a march on Bank of America, and they went and they sat in to get some reform of the terrible foreclosure practices, which they won, and they invited Occupy Boston to come with them. And so this, what would have been a small sort of people with at-risk housing small march, turned into this great big march because the whole encampment marched. So to me, actually, I'm opinionated about this, but I think that's a feature of working class activism, is like pick a specific target and ask for a particular thing that's going to help some actual people in the short run. So that's part of it. Also things that are organized through the internet. There's a great book I really recommend called Tear Gas and Twitter, about all the many movements around the world where mass mobilizations have been inspired by social media, but then often the work is not done to get people into local organizations with roles. That leadership development and coordination part doesn't happen. And so they're very vulnerable to repression, that when the repression comes down. So Occupy had no plan B when they got kicked out of their various encampments around the country and when winter set in. So anyway, that's some of my opinions. It was great causes, great vision, popularized the 99% and the 1%, which is an enduring contribution to the discussion of economic inequality, but way too little targeting.
So we have a question about some people want some resources from you, Betsy. So books that you might recommend, and we can't post anything on the chat here that can be copied. So is there a way that we can? Is there a way that we can? I mean, you can click on links, right? And you save the link. But anyway.
Okay, I could start. Yeah.
So any books that you would recommend, or?
Well, the theory that I was sharing at the beginning, that terrible fuzzy graphic of the stages and the roles, that's from the book called Doing Democracy by Bill Moyer and others. It lays out this movement action plan. That was that first piece of theory that I was doing. So, and in the, I can share the first slide. Can people click from a slide?
I'll put that title in the, chat too.
It's really great because it's got advice of what you do at each stage. So if you're like, oh, wow, our rallies are shrinking, but public opinion is an all-time high like we are now, it's got a bunch of tips. So I really respect that.
So we had another question, and this was earlier, and we didn't get to ask it. Ikram, do you agree with Betsy that Black Lives Matter has reached stage 7, the success stage? Do you agree with Betsy?
Thank you for that question. I agree somewhat. Yes, I do, but there's still a lot of what's going on in the country today. A lot of the action that's taking towards change for the Black Lives Matter movement and for Black people all over the country. Some of it may be performative, and that's what me and a lot of my fellow organizers and just a lot of people in general are worried about. We're worried about a lot of people, just the general public, viewing these actions as, you know, making real change. Some of these performative actions, some examples can be painting Black Lives Matter on the street, or making murals and you know, changing. Even there was a law passed in Louisville, I don't know what it's called, which is the city where Breonna Taylor was killed, her hometown. And there was a law passed that was dedicated to her. And the law was about no-knock warrants not being viable anymore, not being legal. It's crazy that they were legal in the first place. But yeah, so that law was passed. But still, the police officers who have killed, who are responsible for Breonna Taylor's death are still out there. They haven't been arrested yet. They're still living their lives as they would if they hadn't done this. So I wouldn't call that law being performative, but the fact that there are documentaries being made about Breonna Taylor, they're painting Black Lives Matter in the streets of Louisville, or even in Nubian Square, which is a square right in Boston. They painted it and I saw it, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done in Boston. Boston is quite literally one of the most segregated cities in the country, which is crazy. So like, people of color have been pushed into neighborhoods and we're trying to get them out of these situations. So that's the real change that we're talking about. And I wouldn't say that BLM has had a lot of success in that, because just from my perspective, I'm seeing a lot of evil from our government officials, not just Trump, but like mayors all across the country, the mayor of New York City, the mayor of Minneapolis, the mayor of Louisville. All of these people, I've been seeing so much hate and so much ignorance coming from them that maybe my perspective might be a little bit warped, because I'm just seeing a lot of bad stuff in social media today. But I wouldn't exactly say that there's been a lot of success. There has been some success for sure, and Betsy's right about that.
So early success.
Yeah.
Yes. So I think an answer for like sharing some resources is maybe we can get this out in the First Parish community, either through some sort of, we'll figure it out, right? So a resource page for further readings and things like this. We'll put our minds together and figure this out. Where to, perhaps on the web page. First Parish must have something under racial justice. We could put it there, resources. Okay. Any other questions? We're up against 8:30 now, and we said an hour and a half. We promised. Anybody else? Well, it's been wonderful.
If we're closing up now, I just want to make sure that we recognize Steph here for her tech help.
Yes.
We were hopeless this afternoon trying to get this thing organized, and Steph stepped in at the last minute. Thank you.
Thank you, Steph. And thank you, participants. Betsy, thank you everybody else for showing up. It was wonderful that you could be here. And
thank you, Ikram, for
thank you,
speaking
Ikram.
to us.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Ikram. And thanks to the Social Justice Committee of First Parish.
Thank you guys for inviting me. You guys are all, seems like you guys are an amazing community that wants to actually make a lot of change. And I really appreciate that.